Welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you are able to pause and rewind me as I deliver you our latest content. So go ahead and grab those markers, get yourself a nice comfy space in which to work, and of course don't forget those binder notes, where you can go in lockstep order with this video, Unit 7, Video 11, running out of fingers here, Social Cognitive Perspective, on pages 20 and 21 in your Unit 7 binder notes. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome to our final set of notes in Unit 7. As you can see from the learning targets, we're going to be looking at the social cognitive perspective and our sense of self, right? So I don't want you to confuse the whole self thing with humanism, okay? Just because we're talking about one's self here doesn't mean that we're talking about humanism. And we'll get more into what that means in a couple of minutes. We're combining these two approaches on the personality. Social cognition psychologists believe that we learn behaviors from conditioning, observing, and modeling. And I don't want you to think of this as behaviorist theory, although it does have some of those same ideas and components as part of it. But think of the social part being just as important here, with the observing and the modeling, okay? It's the belief that we are watching others, and they emphasize the importance of the mental processing, hence the cognitive component part of it as well. Okay, so it focuses on how we and our environment kind of intertwine, how they interact with each other. So how we behave in the interaction of our traits within that environment, okay, depending on who we're speaking to or who we're interacting with. Okay, different situations. No human being behaves the same exact way with every single person in their life. Okay, different situations call for different parts of you to come out. And in the sideboard, I want you to write that trait theory is criticized for underestimating the situations that we are part of, right? They say that we behave the same because of the way that our traits are, no matter what the given situation. You have to at least recognize what the situation is that you're a part of, right? So a big name in this perspective is one that we're quite familiar with, Albert Bandura. We've seen him before in the cognition unit with the Bobo doll experiment, right? He came up with this idea, right? Something called reciprocal determinism. And that says that our personality is shaped by an interaction between essentially three different things. Cognitive being our beliefs, our values, our thoughts, and our feelings. Interacting with how we act, our behaviors, okay, which is our outward actions. And then we have our environmental factors, such as social influences, like our family, our friendships, media, our peers, hence the social part of the cognitive approach. An example being that hard work will take you so far, right? That's your cognitive belief, right? Is that if you work really hard at something, you're going to get what you want out of life. If you study hard and get good grades, you get into the good college. And then when you go to college and do well there, you get into the good graduate school or law school or medical school or whatever it is that you want to do in graduate level work, right? And you are praised by your parents, you are admired by your friends, and you get attention from your parents, right? All that stuff is environmental. Okay, so that part of it, right? So talking about how, like you do in school or whatever, is your mindset to be successful, right? It's called reciprocal, right? They all kind of interact with one another. Three ways that individuals interact with our environment. Different people choose different environments. So think of the different friends in your friend group, okay? These individuals, your friends, can influence the way that you behave. They might influence how you tackle things like schoolwork or the music that you guys all like, right? You may have become friends because of a shared musician or a shared artist, or you liked the clothes that somebody was wearing and that's what started you talking to each other. Our personalities are shaped by how we interpret and react to events. So some people are calm people while others people are anxious people. Okay, our reactions to, say, an emergency will be different depending on our personality traits. Okay, our personalities help create situations to which we react. So how we treat each other is often how they will treat us in return, right? That old Bible saying, be nice unto others and they will be nice unto you. Let's take a look at the self part. Here's this word called self-efficacy. It's a person's belief about his or her skills and ability to perform certain behaviors. So the greater a person's sense of self-efficacy, the more confident that he or she is in her or his ability to deal with life's challenges or when they're given a particular task. So one's self-efficacy has a powerful effect on his or her behavior, but it's not considered a trait. Okay, self-efficacy is not a trait because it can only be understood in relation to specific behaviors and situations. Okay, so trait theorists say that our traits stay the same no matter what, while self-efficacy is saying, wait a minute, your efficacy changes depending on what situation you're confronted with, meaning it's not a generalized thing across all situations. Okay, personal control is next. Let's kind of shift gears here and talk about personal control. Our personal sense of control is what we are either controlling or we are being controlled by the environment, right? This is called the locus of control. Julian Rotter, make sure you know that name, Julian Rotter, right? That name could definitely come up on the test, is a really good indicator on the test that says that there are two types of personality control: external locus of control and the internal locus of control. Okay, so external locus of control is the perception that chance or fate or outside forces determine our future. Okay, that we are destined to become or fated to become whatever it is that we're going to become someday. Okay, that the things that happen to us, okay, why did it happen to me, right? We say that things happen to us, wherein an internal locus of control is that the perception that one controls their own destiny or fate. Okay, the choices, your free will determine how your life plays out, the choices and decisions that you make. Okay, so this perception is we make things happen. Okay, the people with an internal locus of control, they receive higher grades in school because they are less likely to succumb to the pressure of others, like peer pressure. Like, you don't need to study tonight, let's go to the party, it's going to be so much more fun, you can always study, right? No. Right? If you're a serious student, you have to have the ability to say no to stuff like that. Okay? You have to engage in physical activities that are healthy for your future. So you probably, a little bit more active and a little bit more healthier, and you become able to set limits for yourself. Okay, so this internal locus of control, though simply stated, because there are things in life and in this world that no one individual can control. If you say get into a car accident, right, that wasn't fate, right? It wasn't your fault that happened. that somebody died in a car accident, right? You didn't control that. So you have to say, oh my gosh, what was I doing at that moment? And then you blame yourself. It's very bad, right? Like, you can't just blame yourself for things that were out of your control. You're gonna go crazy, right? Not that we really like to use the word crazy in a psychology class, but you're gonna be so overwhelmed and stressed out. Having too much of an internal locus of control really is probably just as bad as having an external amount, and any amount of external locus of control. Next up is learned helplessness. Okay, so sticking with this personal control thing, Martin Seligman, we remember him with the mats that were electrocuted with the dogs and they wouldn't just jump over the fence, right? They just gave up suddenly. This is learned helplessness. We're going to talk a little bit about learned helplessness more with human beings, though, right? We've seen the previous units with animals, but let's talk about this learned hopelessness with passive resignation, meaning that a person resigns or gives up passively. They are passive. They resign. They say, I don't have any control here, so why would I even bother trying anymore? I've tried doing this math problem over and over and over. I'm never going to learn it. I might as well give up. I'm not a math person. Seligman says that this is passive resignation, and it's learned when one is unable to avoid repeated traumatic events. One cannot feel he or she can escape, even if they try, over and over and over again. Okay, so you have to rise above that when that happens and find a plan that works for you so that you can learn the things even when you think that you can't. I felt like I cannot escape this life of mine, this relationship of mine. You have control over who you allow into your life. No matter what I do, they're not going to make me, or no matter what I do, I'm never going to get out of here, right? With that mentality, it's what we could call learned helplessness. They feel zero sense of control over a situation and often transfer those feelings to other situations or other people who are given little control. For instance, people who are in prison or who go to a military school, right? If you messed up in middle school or high school, sometimes you get sent away to these military schools or a nursing home experience where you have such low morale because you have no sense of control over the littlest decisions in your own life anymore, right? You don't get to decide what to do with your money, what to do with your clothing, what to do with your time, right? You're on a schedule when you're in a nursing home based on very rigid schedules of what the social workers have set up for you. If someone is experiencing learned helplessness, even when they are giving a leg up or a helping hand, they deny it because they say that nothing would work, right? If we would be like some extreme of learned helplessness. Optimism is next. Positive psychology, right? What it is to be grateful every day, or to keep a journal and be grateful and reflect upon the things that you're grateful for. This idea of just choosing positivity. So optimism, right? To have an optimistic outlook is to always look on the bright side of things, or to look at the glass as half full, right? A pessimist would look at a glass half empty, right? So it's good to have a positive outlook, but we need a sense of reality as well. So excessive optimism can be detrimental to a person, just like excessive internal locus of control. Excessive sense of optimism can cause a person to be blinded to the risks, such as AIDS, right? Or sexually transmitted disease. I don't need to use a condom. I don't need to use any kind of protection. I don't care if I get pregnant, right? Who cares if I'm in college and I get pregnant? I can drop out and marry some rich guy. No. Right? You need to be aware of the choices that you make and make sure that you have control over your own decisions, right? it's great just to stay positive. And right, it's kind of like joy on Inside Out when she says, I'll be positive. And then sadness comes running over and says, well, I am positive and this is going to be awful. Something like that, right? It's a funny spin on between joy and sadness.
Wait, Joy, you could get lost in there.
Think positive.
Okay, I'm positive you will get lost in there. That's long-term memory. An endless warren of corridors and shelves. I read about it in the manuals.
The manuals? The manuals! You read the manuals!
Yeah,
So you know the way back to headquarters.
I guess.
You are my map. Let's go. Lead on, mind map. Show me where we're going.
Okay, only I'm too sad to walk. Just give me a few hours. Oh,
Which way? Left?
right. No, I mean go left. I said left was right, like correct.
Okay.
This actually feels kind of nice.
Okay, here we go. We'll be back to headquarters before morning. We can do it. This'll be easy. This is working.
But joy eventually gives in and realizes and says, I would be blind to sadness in life, but I can't be blind to the difficulties in life. And say that joy and positivity is going to solve everything. It helps it, definitely helps it, but it doesn't solve everything. Okay, so individuals with an abundance of optimism also tend to be overconfident. Okay? When least competent at a task. So when you are like awful at something, yet you might say, or they might act out like they're the best at it. Well, that's not good either, right? That's denial, right? So what are the criticisms of this perspective of social cognitives? Well, it focuses too much on the situation, right? So if trait theory is criticized for underestimating the situation, social cognitive is criticized for overemphasizing the situation or the environment, right? So much of that fails to recognize a person's inner traits. It doesn't even recognize their kind of personality. It doesn't look at the influences of the unconscious motives. That's not good either, right? Our emotions are pervasive traits that many psychologists would also believe that we influence our behaviors. So they're kind of criticized for underestimating the other perspectives. So if we are, say, having a self-assessment, right, your self, right, your most conscious self, it's the important item about personality according to humanistic psychologists, which we have talked about now already, right? So self-esteem, meaning feelings of self-worth, is beneficial. So people who feel good about themselves have a good self-worth. They have fewer sleepless nights, less anxiety, do not conform easily, which is good, right? That's a good thing, right? They stand out and they try to be different, and they are persistent during those difficult tasks. And they're going to persevere through whatever it is that they're up against, any difficulty, right? They are less shy and lonely, and they are generally happier, okay? So we want people to have a good self-esteem. And then there's this thing called a self-serving bias. This is our readiness to perceive ourselves favorably. Okay, so it's when people accept responsibility for good deeds than for bad. So for example, if you say fail a test, right, and you didn't really even study, and you take this test and you fail it, you say, oh, that's because the teacher doesn't know how to teach. But if you do really well on the test, you say, oh, that's because I'm a genius in this topic, right? So if you fail, it's somebody else's fault. If you pass, it's because you're such a genius, right? or maybe you make some excuse like my pencil broke, or there was a lawnmower outside the window and I was having a super bad day and I couldn't focus on the questions because of the drilling that was going on outside, or the lawnmower. People see themselves as better than average when they have a self-serving bias. Okay, next up is individualism versus collectivism. We've briefly talked about this before as well. The individualists will have more of an emphasis on the independent self. The self being defined by personal values, okay? The personal goals and attributes. This is more of the Western culture of the world, especially we Americans, right? And then the collectivists have more of an emphasis on the collective parts of the world, right? So the interdependency of groups of people, right? So the self is defined by connections with our friends and our families and our groups that we hang around with, where the group having higher priority than the individual. Okay, those would be the collectivists, right? So the individual goals of a particular person don't matter so much. Okay, it's the group's goals that matter. The social cognitive, kind of wrapping up our unit on personality here, because behavioralists and talking about how we are learning through social presence of things, but also how we're thinking about all of that happening, right? So this kind of being the final video and summation of this unit of Unit 7, we want to make sure that we understand the difference. Okay, and that's all I have for you tonight. Bye now.